The Radical Secular Podcast, a demand for justice, equality, and rational public policy.
Hello and welcome back to the Radical Secular Podcast. I'm Christophe Defo.
I'm Sean Prophet.
Today we're joined by our friend Drey Aaron, who will help us investigate the relationship among the African American community, religion, and atheism. During our news segment, Sean and I will react to the super sad and super unsurprising mass shooting that took place in Boulder, Colorado last week, as well as the super sad and super unsurprising Jim Crow law enacted in Georgia last week. But before we get into any of that, I want to remind you that if you like our show, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, check out theradicalsecular.com, and tell your friends to listen. New episodes post Mondays at noon Eastern on YouTube and all the major podcast channels. And if you're into reading, check out the blog at theradicalsecular.com.
Visit our website at theradicalsecular.com and sign up for free access to exclusive content and giveaways, our full library of episodes, and articles at the Radical Secular blog. Email us with your comments and suggestions, and follow us on social media.
And speaking of the blog, Sean, you wrote a great article for the Radical Secular blog. Do you want to give us a little bit of a preview or what?
Yeah, it's just interesting because the article is called The Douchebag's Razor. And I came up with that because, we're seeing all of this just nonsense coming from the right, which has become their total strategy. We've talked about this a little bit before on the show, where the sort of opposition to cancel culture and the just constant belly aching about social justice and racism has become really the kind of number one Republican strategy. And so I just thought I would really put it into words. And then I did a little dialogue at the end, just talking about how this kind of plays out in the public sphere every time. And my tagline for this article is, openly expressed racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia are destroying democracy. And it's really true because we had at a certain point, I guess kind of from the civil rights, the signing of the Civil Rights Act in that civil rights era up until recently, we had a kind of an agreement that it was not okay to say publicly a lot of things. The public use of the N-word, a lot of the shock jock kind of stuff that we started seeing, from the late 80s until now on right-wing talk radio, and would get you banned from any sort of real media. And that broke down really badly in the Trump era. And now we are seeing people like Tucker Carlson, whose picture I used for the article, using this douchebag's razor at all times to basically claim persecution. And, these are white men in America are the most powerful cultural social group in America, white Christian men specifically. And they are the ones who are now can be counted on to scream the loudest about persecution, yet they have all the power. So it's like, this is something that it's an old story. It's something a lot of people have talked about, but I felt like it really needed to be spelled out because it's kind of like, by stoking this controversy on a constant basis, the right wing has really made a lot of progress. And they have actually, and it's not just, there's like a type A and a type B in this situation. The first one is where, there's someone says something racist and then someone else says that person should be fired. And then all the right wing rushes to the defense of that person. And it immediately starts a conversation that can take place at, over Thanksgiving dinner. It can take place over at lunch in the workplace. And it immediately creates an issue where you have to decide whether are you going to defend justice or are you going to defend some beleaguered white man who said something horrible, right? Or the type B is where there's some company makes progress, like they stop publishing something racist. And then again, this starts the whole cycle of the douchebag's razor all over again, where people are saying, oh no, let's defend the racist publication. And the other people are going, no, we don't want to defend racism. And then it starts these arguments. And the end result of these discussions nearly inevitably ends up throwing support to Republicans. Because something like 70% of Americans really don't like cancel culture. They don't like the idea that someone should be fired from their job or lose business because of something they said. And so what it does, though, is because they know it's a winning issue, they do it all the time. And it becomes a distraction and a deflection from a lot of really important things that we should be talking about. So that's the gist of the article.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. We hate the cancel culture, even the name cancel culture on this show. We always talk about this, right? Because it's such a red herring. It's not even red herring. It's a distraction, a deflection. It really, really is from the real issue. And the issue then becomes about the outrage about this person being fired, as opposed to the social justice issue that underpins it, right? Yeah. And so it was a really, really great article, Sean, and I really appreciate you telling us a little bit about it. And everybody out there should check out the blog, right? We are going to rewrite articles. Among the three of us, we wrote 3 last week, and we're going to keep them coming. And so they're a good sort of companion sort of thing to what we're doing here. And check out our website also. You have anything else you want to say about it, Sean?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add one more thing, and that is that Christians invented cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was starting with burning witches at the stake and all the way on down the line, Christians have been the ones to dictate what is and is not acceptable behavior. And there's still plenty of parts of the United States where you could be fired from your job if you don't go to church.
Right. Or, by the way, that you're gay.
Right.
Right. I mean, there's a whole class of people that they're saying we are not even going to acknowledge exists. And so, come on, right? Like, that's the ultimate cancel culture. You're trying to cancel an entire minority and say these people just don't exist, right? So it's hypocrisy, and we shouldn't be surprised at the hypocrisy, but still, it's outrageous.
And they're trying to write it into the law, and I think we're going to be talking about some of that. And that is the various laws where they are making it legal to discriminate specifically for doctors and medical professionals to discriminate against gay people in certain states. And by the way, there was also another article this week about a woman who worked for a Panera store, and her manager found out that she was not religious. She was pagan or something. She was not a Christian. And he basically said he's going to be cutting her hours to almost nothing until she accepted Jesus. So
what do you even say to that?
Yeah, what do you say?
What do you even say to that? I mean, it's just so absurd.
This is what the Douchebag's razor has tried to turn around, and the people who are guilty of this are the ones barking the loudest about it. So true,
man. Well, thanks for that, Sean. And we're not going to do the t-shirts right now because we're going to do it later on during our guest segment. Okay, so let's first get into the Boulder Mass Shooting. Very sad. The details of last week's shooting in Colorado is by now familiar to our audience. The New York Times reports, quote, around 2:30 p.m. on Monday, March 22nd, the aisles of a King Soopers grocery store a few miles south of the campus of the University of Colorado became a scene of terror when a gunman began shooting using an assault-style rifle. Shoppers and employees ran for cover, and some said they had escaped through an employee stock area in a loading dock at the back of the store. About 6 hours after the shooting, the Boulder Police Chief, Maris Harold, announced that 10 people had been killed, including a police officer. Eric Talley, age 51, who joined the Boulder Police Department in 2010, was the first officer to respond to the scene and was also the first casualty. The authorities identified the 9 additional victims as Denny Stong, age 20, Nevin Stanisic, age 23, Ricky Olds, age 25, Trelana Bart Kowiak, age 49, Suzanne Fountain, age 59, Terry Leiker, age 51, Kevin Mahoney, age 61, Lynn Murray, age 62, and Jody Waters, age 65, end quote. How are you thinking, Sean, about this all too familiar pattern of events? Have you had enough?
Well, look, this is insane. All I can say is that these are planned shootings. We've known for a decade that these mass shootings are going to continue. Mm-hmm. And not only have we not done anything about it, but the laws have gotten worse. The situation in Boulder was such that there was a city ban on the sales of assault-style weapons, and a judge overturned that ban 10 days before this shooting, and the weapon was bought 6 days before the shooting. And by the way, this was no ordinary AR-15. This was a Ruger AR-15 style pistol, okay? And this is a pistol that is much smaller than the normal military rifle that these mass shooters use, but it uses the same ammunition and it causes the same kind of damage. And I want to point this out for people who don't really understand. They hear that it's a .223 caliber, and the .223 caliber, it's the same size slug as a .22 rifle, but it has about 5 to 8 times as much powder behind it, okay? And this is the reason why the military designed this sort of weapon, is because it is a very small and light ammunition compared to the .308, but it's devastating to the human body. The slug, because it's going so fast, it tumbles within the body, puts a hole in a person about the size of an orange. And by the way, this is the same type of ammunition that killed those children at Sandy Hook. And if we weren't going to do anything about a class of kindergartners being killed, or first graders at Sandy Hook, then we're certainly not going to do anything about people being killed in a grocery store or at a massage parlor or a theater or a church or anywhere else. We've basically decided in this country that mass shootings are going to happen, and it's a crapshoot. Basically, any day of the week, your life could end, or the life of a family member in America in a public place. And this is the reality. And I really sort of recognized now, after seeing the way the Republican Party reacted to COVID, which I don't know if you heard today, but Deborah Birx just made a statement saying that at least a couple of 100,000, if not more, of COVID deaths could have been prevented had the Trump administration acted properly. And so we know the whole thing got politicized. Republican Party doesn't care about people's lives. That all they wanted to do was open up. All they wanted to do was get rid of their masks. And again, if they're not going to protect 500,000 Americans from dying of a pandemic, they're certainly not going to do anything about 10 people in a grocery store.
They sure won't. They sure won't, Sean. They sure won't. And they really don't care. I think what ends up happening, and I think the Sandy Hook reference that you made is an important one, right? Because we were talking about children. And by the way, this is the party of pro-life, right? I mean, the hypocrisy, as we just talked about earlier, the hypocrisy is, it just makes you shake your head, because it's so astonishing. And no one, one of the biggest problems that they have is empathy, right? And it is not being able to put yourself into other people's shoes, because as soon as any one of those people has one of their own family members shot in one of those, right, in one of those mass shootings, I think your tune really changes once you actually have to feel the pain of a completely senseless death. Now, I remember this, I think, came out this week in an article I read. Bill O'Reilly, that real fucking shithead. He said, right, that this is the price that America pays for freedom. So that is the mentality. So the mentality is explicitly what you're saying, Sean, is like, yes, we are absolutely willing to pay this price so that we can have 44% of the entire planet's guns.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And he said that a number of times, and so have other people. Ted Cruz made a terrible comment again. And here's the thing that is so ironic, is that when a mass shooting happens, okay, liberals care about people's lives being lost. Republicans defend the guns every single time. Every
single time. And, I've talked about this before, but there is this strain in the United States, and it's a theory, and I think it's maybe a critical race theory, and I'm critical of critical race theory, but nevertheless, I think there is something to be said of it, and that is this obsession with guns goes right back to, first of all, honor culture. And it's very much tied into racism. Like every fucking thing in this country is tied into racism and Jim Crow and to the slave patrols. This idea that if you oppress people, which has been a huge part of the American story, is oppressing people, then you are always concerned that they're going to come back and try and fight you, right? And so you have this narrative in the United States about Antifa or thugs, or that there's that, and the entire Nazi or right-wing alt-right ideology is that black people are coming to rape your lily white kids, your lily white daughters, and you have to defend yourself, right? So it's inextricably connected to racism in this country, this obsession with guns. And that's what they're defending, I think, Sean. That's what they value more than human life.
Well, that's it. And this is really, I want to plug this book by Tom Hartman. It's called The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. And it's a book that I listened to a couple of years ago. And it really—
I listened to that one too, actually.
It lays out the case so well about how guns have shaped American history. And not just we're talking about slave patrols and black people, by the way. We slaughtered most of the people who lived in our country.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, and Native Americans, this is all wrapped up into that. And, the party is always not the point. It's about the white supremacy. And again, and we're going to be talking about atheism later, and that is a huge thing we talk about here. But really, at the end of the day, we're concerned about secularism and all that sort of thing, because because if you don't have that, you can't have justice. And it's not surprising that the party of minority rule, the party of oppression of voting, that is also the party that needs to enforce that with firearms and is obsessed with that concept,
Completely. I mean, going all the way back to our revolution, I think that the American Revolution was a good thing that it happened, but there are so many bad things that are wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
In terms of even it being the defense of slavery, because when England had abolished slavery, they like 1830, long before the Civil War.
Right.
But there was discussion of it even before the American Revolution, and there was a group of people who actually wanted to stay loyal to England, and they were called the United Empire Loyalists. They left and went to Canada because they weren't down with what the Americans were doing in terms of the way they were setting up their country.
Right.
And then later the way the Constitution was written. People understood back then even that this was a violent movement.
Inherently. So let's now talk about the Georgia Jim Crow law, that strange history of Jim Crow that we are apparently still living in as we speak. Time magazine reports that, quote, the new law in Georgia will give the state's Republican majority legislature more control over county election boards, which certify elections. It also adds voter ID requirements for absentee ballots, limits access to ballot drop boxes while codifying them into state law, expands early voting days for the general election, criminalizes the practice of line warming, in which volunteers hand out food and water to voters standing on long lines, bans the use of provisional ballots for most cases of out-of-precinct voting, shortens runoff elections, and all but eliminates the use of mobile voting buses, barring emergencies, among other rules. Sean, how disgusting is this?
There's so many things wrong with this law. I can't even talk about it. Okay, it's a 95-page law. That's a lot of voting restrictions. And one of the ones that I just haven't wrapped my head around yet is how the legislature plans to overrule the election results. What are they going to do? I mean, I don't understand this. Are they going to look at the vote counts and then say, oh, we don't like those counts, we're going to change them? I mean, what exactly? This is something that I think the lawyers are probably already looking at. And I think there's already been lawsuits against this law because it's utterly absurd. And I want to point out something else too. And that is that they are not only changing the rules around voting, but they're also changing how people who canvass, right? Now, they're requiring people to take training courses for canvassing in a state. And in order to do that, they're now breaking it down where if you get trained in one county, you can't go to another county and go to collect votes. So it's just, they have thought of every possible way. I think they've taken a look at what Stacey Abrams did and said, we're going to stop every single thing that she's trying to do and anybody else like her in any other state. And there's like 200 of these bills. This is a flurry of insanity, of voter suppression, and of just it's a coup. This is more of this slow motion coup that we talked about that did not end on January 6th. They're
Nope.
trying to take that lie, the big lie of election fraud, and turn that into law. And this is what we saw this week. And by the way, okay, I have to say one more thing, and that is these guys sitting there at this shiny table, all like white guys flanking the governor. And what does he have behind him?
Oh, you can't make this shit up.
He has a picture of a plantation hanging on the wall.
The tone deafness, right? The inability to see like the optics of this. And it really is astonishing. Like, what I found, I'm reminded of our discussion in episode 37, Bloody Sunday for the People, right? When we talk about all of the efforts to make voting as complicated as possible. That was immediately what I thought of as I was reading about this bill. I mean, and it's all technically legal stuff, right? That's really the thing is, because people think that Jim Crow voter suppression was the KKK coming and burning crosses on people's lawns. Yes, there was some of that, but that was like reserved for civil rights leaders and the people that really stood out. Most people, most of the time, the real suppression of the vote came from these exact kinds of laws. And we talked about it again in that episode. These laws that make it unnecessarily complicated to vote or in this case, even participate in the activities that get people to the polls. And that is the most sickening part of it, right? Is that like, it is the most explicit attempt to freeze in place, to dismantle, to dissuade people from exercising the most fundamental part of being a part of a democracy, including and just participating. It is encouraging people to not participate.
Well, this is, and it's just transparently obvious. It's like the idea that they would stop people from having a bus to pick up voters to bring them to the polls. Like, how could you do that? The idea that they would stop food and water from being delivered to voting lines that they're deliberately making longer and longer.
Yeah, exactly.
And it goes beyond even that, though, because there was a representative, a Georgia state representative. Her name is Park Cannon, and she tried to knock on the governor's door to protest the signing of this bill, and she was arrested and charged with 2 felonies. Dragged out of the Georgia Capitol by 2 white cops. Okay. So you've got this black woman trying to protest this terrible Jim Crow law that's being signed in front of a picture of a plantation. And then you got 2 white cops arresting. This is like a movie.
It really is. And you know what it is too, Sean, is there is this, and I've thought about this in many different ways, or many different times. And that is that they don't even realize how obvious it is, and they're not afraid of consequences or accountability. That's for damn sure. But it's even more than that, what I think. And that is when people are powerful and not accountable, they really don't underestimate what it feels like to be oppressed. Right? These guys have no idea what it's like to be oppressed, right? So they really underestimate how this kind of stuff this will get people pumped the fuck up to vote, right? And they don't really they don't see it that way. They really think that they can tamp down sort of oppress people indefinitely. And that's the problem with oppression, is that people don't want to be oppressed. People want to be free. And so you can do it for a long time. I mean, look, you can have maybe even a century, 4 centuries of oppression, but eventually you can't keep it up. Eventually people will say, I've had enough. And it doesn't mean it can't get really, really fucking bad, But this stuff is not sustainable.
We're going to find out in a few years, because I think it's really gotten to the point now with the Republican Party is if they do get control of Congress back or control of the White House back, they're going to do some really, really some stuff that we can't right now imagine. And I'm afraid that it could be a one-way ticket, because I think they understand that this is their last shot. They're losing the demographics. They're losing public opinion. And it's just, the only thing they have left are these strong arm tactics.
Pure power at this point, right? Pure power. That's all they have going for them. And so what do you think? So here is my take on this, and maybe I'm being a little rosy, maybe I'm being a little bit of an Obama Democrat here, as I like to call myself, and I'm wearing, my Joe shirt. We saw the press conference this week. Joe Biden did his first press conference as president. I think he did a great job. He was very Joe Biden, like in every fucking way. Like, I mean, he was just like, he was like, goes off on kind of a tangent. He's like, is that enough of an answer for you? Do you want to know more? He's just like, so he did that same thing during the debate. Like he was talking to during the town hall debate, and he was talking to this young black guy, and he was like, you want me to continue talking with we could talk afterward. You want to and he'll definitely do that. Like he will like talk to you forever about whatever you want to talk about. Yeah, so anyway, but I wonder, and it was a great press conference. I'm bringing this up because he mentioned and hinted that he's interested in doing something with the filibuster. And of course, he doesn't have the control over that, right? Joe Manchin really is vice president, really, in that way. I like to call him Senate Majority Leader, because essentially he sets the agenda. But I will say this, is that even someone like Joe Manchin, and again, maybe I'm being a little rosier and I want to know what you think. Maybe I think Joe Manchin will have to say, like, look, if we don't do something about the filibuster, we will have we will not only not get things done, but we will lose power. Yeah. We will never be able to be a democracy again if we let these people just do these laws,
Well, here's what I think. I don't like to be in the speculation business in terms of like, will he or won't he? But right. What I do know is that as keenly aware as you and I are about what's going on here in Georgia and with the rest of these despicable bills, okay, as much as we're aware of that, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are also very aware of this.
Definitely.
And so is everybody else in the Democratic Party. And I think that, Manchin comes out with these definitive statements, but I do think that there's a whole different conversation going on in private and back channel. That these conversations are taking place, and they're taking place not just among Democrats, but also among Republicans. Republicans know this is do or die. Like they have to defeat this legislation or they're done. And Democrats know they have to pass this legislation or they're done. Right. And it's going to go one way or the other. Either we're going to figure this out and we're going to become more of a democracy, and Democrats are going to be able to roll back some of these horrible changes that have taken place in voting laws, or it's going to become a fascist theocracy. It's not like we can really dither much longer on this point, because both sides are bringing the pressure to bear. HR 1 is a challenge into the teeth of theocracy and fascism. And
sure is.
They know it. They've reacted accordingly. They've called it, from the gates of hell or whatever they said about it, and we've called them out too and said that these voter suppression tactics are anti-democratic and basically fascist. So the battle lines are drawn. I think that 2022 and 2024 are going to really set the tone for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I am, in that sense, the silver lining. I am grateful that Trump and Trumpism and really just brought it's like squeezing the pus out of like a zit or something like that. Like it brought it to the surface. It just brought it to the surface. We're finally addressing the issues we should have addressed in fucking 1865. Right? We should have got this shit squared away in 1865. Right? That we should have done what they did in Germany and just sort of called this stuff out. You have monuments that say, right, in Berlin, right, they have at the Reichstag, it says, this is where Hitler was defeated. This is where fascism, right, like very explicit. So no one can forget. So the history can't be rewritten, because that's what happened in this country. And here we fucking are. So finally, like you say, battle lines have been drawn. And we'll see how it goes. Are we going to be a fascist theocracy or are we going to be a democracy?
Well, if we were going to be a democracy, people like Tucker Carlson would have to be pulled off the air. And I think he is the pus that's coming out. He is the douchebag's razor. He is all those things that we always say about him. Having someone like that openly making these, he might as well be wearing a KKK hat.
Absolutely.
He is, as a matter of fact, white nationalists have said about Tucker Carlson that he's a better communicator about white nationalism than they are. So
definitely,
if we let somebody like that continue to spew their hateful bile on an ongoing basis, we're going to lose the country. And so the cancel culture thing really is the same type of fight. Are we going to allow this to continue or not? And so it's voting, and it's also cultural. We have to have this fight. We got to decide.
We got to decide. And it's a really you either honor, like, and you say this a lot, and we can't equivocate on this. You're either are you into democracy or are you not, right? Like, there really isn't like, oh no, I'm kind of into democracy as long as those people don't vote. Like, no, that means you're just not, into democracy. You're not. That means you're not kind of into democracy. You either are or you're not. Right? There really is. So you're either pregnant or you're not. Like, here we are. Right. So look, let's move on to our guest segment. Our guest, Drey Aaron, is, like Sean and I, a secularist and a producer of online video content, a podcaster. We're pleased to welcome him to the show. So without further ado, The Radical Secular presents Drey Aaron. Drey, we're really happy to have you on the show. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Big fan, man. This is awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. So tell us about your shirt, man.
Oh, the shirt. It's just the Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Should I stand up and it's just a Black Lives Matter.
That's awesome though.
A Black Lives Matter shirt that I picked up from the I'm near DC. I'm in Virginia, and we went down to Black Lives Matter Plaza when it first opened. So
what I really like about it is the fact that it has the continent of Africa with the shape of the fist. That's really
right. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the colors too. Outstanding.
Yep, it is cool.
Very, very cool, man.
Don't wear it that often because I don't want to mess it up, but
well, we're honored that you would share it with us and with our audience, we are a t-shirt show. It's a big part of
right. You told me that. I was like, oh man, I need to pick a t-shirt. Let me find one that doesn't have holes in it.
Awesome. So Sean, how about yours?
Well, mine says Nazi punks fuck off, which
that is awesome. That is the coolest shirt I've ever seen.
Yeah. And
I think that was wasn't it a song by Dead Kennedys?
Dead Kennedys. That's Dead Kennedys. Yeah. I'm a punk guy. So, and I know I'm friends with Jello Biafra on Facebook. So, he's still good. He still says a lot of good shit. But there's another thing here that's a connection to what's going on right now in our country. And that is, I just read about an essay contest that was held after World War II about what should happen to Hitler. And it was won by about a 16-year-old young black man who said basically he thought that Hitler should be put in black skin and have to live in America. Oh, man.
Wow.
That is fucking perfect. Oh, my God. That is like so many layers there. Oh, yeah, man.
And I looked it up because I didn't even know. And it sounded like it could have been one of those made up things. And it actually comes from a book called Whiteness of a Different Color. And the political history of whiteness.
Huh.
So wow.
That's brilliant.
That is brilliant. Man, that's brilliant on like 8 different levels.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Exactly.
Whoa.
Whoosh. Wow. That's really on brand for today's episode as well, by the way. So I'm wearing my African American for Joe Biden t-shirt.
Cool.
Very nice.
Yeah, and I haven't worn it since the election, but it was in light of everything that we're going to be talking about today. I think it matters. We talked about earlier in the news segment. We talked about Joe Biden's press conference. We talked about the Georgia new Jim Crow law, which makes me want to flip the fuck out. Right. And I just was and we're going to be talking about Black atheism later as we get into this conversation. So I figured this would be a good sort of shirt to I don't know, work with, man. But that law.
Yeah, it couldn't be more obvious if they tried.
It's just like straight up Jim Crow shit, like straight up Jim Crow shit, you know.
But it's also in line with what they normally do, and that is, you know, cheat, steal. That's what they do. They did it to once Obama was in office, and I figured you know what? They just went to the extreme this time.
Yeah,
like they're
not even trying to hide it anymore. They're not even trying to hide it.
There's no reason to hide anything ever again. Trump made sure of that.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah. Trump made everything explicit. All the stuff that used to be wink, wink, nod, nod is now, or as Sean likes to say, it's a dog foghorn. No more dog whistles.
Yeah, no more whistles. No more whistles.
No more whistles.
It's clear they don't fear being held accountable. They think they're just going to keep getting away with this.
That's right. And what they're doing is pissing off a lot of black voters. And that's a bad thing if you are a Republican. You do not want a bunch of pissed off black voters, because then they will vote. And then you will lose. Then you will lose.
You know what I think also? You know? Right. I don't think because they've never been held accountable for anything, I don't think they think that day of reckoning is coming.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think that's absolutely right.
And they're definitely underestimating the power of just people of color, not just blacks, but just people of color. I think they are woefully underestimating just how bad it's going to be when everybody really starts paying attention, because I don't think everybody's paying attention yet.
No.
I think we got lucky getting Joe Biden in there, and I think people are starting to get complacent. But if they keep up with this shit, their 2024 is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
In fact, I almost want them to continue.
Me too.
Keep hanging going. Yourself.
Exactly. Because you are imploding your party right now, right? Because you are just pissing off so many people that don't pay attention to politics at all, never did for their entire life. Suddenly, like, wait a second, they're doing what? You know, and it just becomes more and more explicit, more and more obvious. And, you know, they can't do the wink, wink, nod, nod thing anymore, you know?
Yeah. And again, they're not trying to, like you said earlier, they're not trying to.
They're not even trying to.
Yeah.
It's also like you can comply with their requirements, right? If they close the polls on Sunday, vote a different day. If they say you can't give people in line water, well, they'll bring their own water. Give them water somewhere else before they get to line. You know, give them, if you want 2 IDs, we can get 3 IDs. You know,
exactly. And all you're going to do is get people like Stacey Abrams even more pumped up, even more organized, and all they're going to do is just comply exactly with the laws and still vote, because again, the higher you break you're just highlighting the voter suppression in the most obvious way. So anyway, let's get into our main conversation for today. Drey, again, welcome to the show. And we're going to talk today about atheism and religiosity in the African American community. Drey, I want to start with just a little bit of background on you. You are our guest here. So this is sort of a softball question. Do you consider yourself an atheist?
Oh, God, yes.
So what? So
and thank God that I am. I am. You can't get any more atheist than I am. Like, seriously. Like, I don't even believe in magic. Like, I get mad when people say, you know, they believe in ghosts. I get irritated. Like, I am straight. There is no daylight between me and atheism.
Same.
we are all on the same boat here.
We're all in the same. Yeah, because here's the thing is, and well, you know what? I wanted to ask you too, because were you always like an atheist? I mean, or did you grow up in a religious environment?
I did. I you know what's funny? I was on someone else's show like a year and a half ago. It was a like a Google Hangout thing. And I mentioned what I'm about to say now. And some people kind of got upset, like, oh, you're well, anyway, this is to answer your question. I actually had a really good upbringing in the church. Like I look back on my days as, you know, even my early teens, And my childhood was awesome. I had a bunch of friends at the church. I didn't have one of those, cliche pastors that that hit on all the women in the church. I didn't have that. A lot of stuff that when I talk to other atheists, a lot of things that made people angry with the church or eventually, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, start to gravitate towards atheism. I didn't experience any of that at all. Right. But to answer your other question, I do think I was always an atheist. Yeah. I just never bought into first the stories, the Noah Ark story, Jesus dead for 3 days. I had a conversation with my pastor when I was younger. We used to go to his house a lot. And once I asked him, hey, I think I was in 5th grade and I just had I had just learned what rigor mortis, what is it, rigor mortis? What is it called? When your body starts to break down and get stiff.
Yeah, rigor mortis, yeah.
Mortis.
Yeah.
Rigor mortis. And I asked him about that. I'm like, hey, didn't that happen to Jesus? Like, how did he just jump up? like, wasn't he already breaking down? Because I learned this week in school that happens. And he said, no, not with Jesus. That wouldn't have happened with Jesus. Anything that would have happened, it just would have been reversed. And I went, okay, that's a good answer, but I think that's bullshit though. But I was, again, I was like 10, 11 or something like that.
Yeah.
I just questioned everything about religion. And once I got older, once you stop believing in Santa Claus, what else is there to believe in? So once I got older, I think that I didn't talk about being an atheist, but I was definitely an atheist by 9th grade. Yeah.
You've got me beat. That's for sure.
Yeah. Me too.
And again, I didn't talk about it. I wouldn't have dared, say, I didn't even know the word atheist. I don't think. I just remember my principal. I was walking with my principal one day and I yarned and she said something about you yarning. I said, yeah, because I'm tired. She said, well, you'll get enough. You can sleep when you get to heaven or something like that. And I was like, ain't no fucking heaven. Like, why would you say that? I just said that to myself. And that was the first thought where I, at least internally, expressed, you know what? That's all bullshit. There's no heaven. There's no hell. There's no God. It's just me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, Drey, because I know, as you probably know, Sean and I have a background in Church Universal and Triumphant, a cult essentially, and certainly a very strict religious environment. Right. And I personally grew up. So I became like a full atheist. I'm 39. I probably not until I was probably in my early 30s. Right, that I became like a full-on outright atheist.
It took you that long to
shed it. It was so, I was so indoctrinated and afraid, right? Afraid of that I would be, that I would, I don't know. I always talk about it in terms of this cosmic ledger, this idea that there is some sort of, some balance sheet out there that of like good deeds and bad deeds. In the church that we grew up in, we would have called it karma, right? Basically, like you have good things that you do and bad things that you do, and it's like, and if you do, and the only salvation really is to sort of transmute that karma, do good deeds or whatever. But the bottom line is, I think there was really fear ultimately that held me in that environment. And like, I am very impressed that you had that sort of questioning mind at such a young age, right? Because Sean, I'm sure you probably have something to say about this too.
Well, yeah, it's definitely the fear. And I think I was in my early 30s too, because I finally left the church at 30, and it took a couple more years after that before the fear went away. And I can remember a few times, like, after leaving the church and, getting stoned or whatever. And you know how most people get a little bit paranoid when they first start smoking pot. And my paranoia was all about like, the masters and God and having to be like called to account for this, it's like, you're high, you're doing this terrible thing. And it just enhanced the paranoia. And also the nuclear war prophecies are always Armageddon prophecies there's so much fear. Like in the middle of the night, if a loud bike would go by or if thunder would happen, I would wake up and think that the war was happening and all this kind of stuff. And it was one day when I was in a parking lot. And I think I've mentioned this before on the show, but and I even remember where it was. It was at a video production company I was working at the time. I was driving out of the parking lot and I just had this overwhelming sense. I was like, that was all bullshit. And I don't have to be bound by it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I'm actually more impressed with you guys because it seems like what you guys are saying is that once you realized it, you were able to untether yourself from it almost immediately. But
took years.
It was a process for sure.
Right. Because, I do, but again, I believe that I was fully atheist in my teens. However, I was 30 also before, and well, no, I don't know, maybe because I got married at 28. So I had to be about 25 or 26 into my 30s where before I just said out loud. Right. Before I said it out loud. Before that, I was just going through the motions. I was living in Germany, and whenever I would come home, I would go to church with my family. We even one time I was getting on the plane coming back to Germany, and my aunt, she had me a bottle of olive oil because that's what we used as blessed oil, as anointing oil. and she had me a bottle of anointing oil, and she said, "You go down the aisle and you just hit every seat with this anointing oil, and God is gonna keep that plane in the air." And I actually did that. I walked down, knowing that, this plane is going to stay in the air regardless, right? But I still went through those motions, and I kept that bottle of anointing oil in my room, in my barracks room, So I'm actually more impressed with you guys because it took me a long time to look in the mirror and go, dude, you are an atheist and you need to start acting like it and speaking out about it.
That's really interesting. So it's almost like an atheist in the closet, right? Because there's so many.
You know what? I was in a closet for a long time. I wasted a lot of years.
and that's really interesting. And that's a really great segue because it ends up being not just about the religion, it's about the culture, right, of the church and the fear.
And the fear, what you guys say, and the fear.
Absolutely. So let me just read a little bit here. We on the left talk a lot about the importance of healthy political and social institutions in a functioning democracy. Few such institutions have made so indelible a mark on modern America than the, quote, Black church. CNN reports that the phrase, the Black church, has long been used by Black scholars and clergy as an umbrella term for all historically Black Protestant denominations, as well as non-denominational churches, with predominantly Black congregations. The Pew Research Center recently published its most comprehensive look at the religious practices of Black Americans, and it found that Black people are more religious than other groups in the United States. Surprise, surprise. While 90% of Americans overall believe in God or a higher power, 97% of Black adults believe it the same, Pew says. And while 54% of Americans surveyed believe, quote, evil spirits can harm, 73% of Black adults say the same. Black Americans are also more likely to say religion is, quote, very important in their lives and to believe prayers to ancestors have protective power. Most Black adults regularly engage in personal prayer, with 63% saying they pray at least once a day. The study also explores the integral fact of the Black church, its stance on social justice. As Pew discovered, that activism remains essential to many African Americans. At least 44% of the Protestant church Black Protestant churchgoers say they heard a sermon, lecture, or discussion on race relations or racial inequality in the last year, while 29% of all adults heard a sermon on same topics during that same period. Gentlemen, in the first instance, why are Black people so damn religious? Drey, I want to give you the first crack at this.
Oh, man.
What do you think?
I'm Black and I couldn't tell you that.
I know it's a hard question. It's a hard question.
You know what? But I've asked that question from my cousins and other Black people, and I never get a straight response. I never get a straight answer. And I think it's because I don't think there's just one answer to that question. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think part of it is we're just used to it. You know, my grandmother was a Christian. Her mother was a Christian. Her mother was a Christian. Her mother was a Christian. So that's what we're used to. And then I think the other part of that, or at the core, is that I think Black people are just very superstitious, or we're still superstitious. And I don't mean like superstitious, break a mirror, 7 years bad luck. I don't mean that. I mean, we still believe in curses, right? We still believe that. I think you read that you can be harmed by a demon. I think that was in the passage you just read. Yep. Like we still
evil
believe evil spirits, and we still believe that. I still have relatives that won't watch, certain movies because they think a demon is going to come out the television and possess them. So yeah, we're very superstitious, and if you can believe that, I mean, what's not to believe that a guide walked on water? Of course,
exactly. Well, right. Then anything. If you believe that, then you believe anything. And I wonder too. And I've thought about this question. I mean, I wrote the damn question, so I thought about it. But as I've been thinking about this over the last week or so, I'm like, first of all, this is going to sound heretical in a lot of ways. That's a pun, I guess, but whatever. Heretical, and that is. The lower education, your education level, the less opportunity people have, the more likely they are to be superstitious, to be religious, blah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. So if you like more affluent people tend to be less religious, right? More educated people tend to be less religious. And the reality is that Black people have less opportunity,
less education,
or on average, less education. Right. And then you add into that fact, and then you add into that just the historical element that you're talking about here. Right. These things are passed down. And so especially if you're an oppressed minority, as Black people obviously are and have been for so long, right, these traditions matter a great deal. I mean, how else do you define yourself in a society that refuses to let you be part of it? Right.
You know what? You're absolutely right, because even though. And that's just to piggyback on what you're saying.
Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah. Even though my own personal story, I never felt like my family would ever disown me. I'm from a very, very close family.
Right.
And I never felt like they would disown me. I mean, hell, they haven't disowned me yet. And I write some crazy shit on Facebook about their God. But there was still a fear in me, which is the reason it took me so long to come out. It was mostly a fear about how the rest of the Black community would treat me, how they would, react to me. So yeah, it's definitely that. It's definitely, and also to piggyback, even educated Black people, they don't shed the superstition from religion. They hold on to it. Black doctors, Black scientists, they still seem to, I think maybe Neil deGrasse Tyson is like the only. Right. But other Black people, no matter how high they go, they love their Jesus. They love God. They will not let that ideology go. It's like, it is absolutely woven into the fabric of Black America.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, Oh, yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask if either one of you have seen the film Contradiction by Jeremiah Kamara.
No.
No, I've not.
Okay, that's an amazing film, and that sheds a lot of light on this question because he's a black director, and it's on Amazon. You can watch it for free if you have Amazon Prime. So I'd recommend it because it goes through the whole history of it, and basically, I think that the slave owners used Christianity to control the slaves, and
For sure.
because if it was one thing to use a whip or whatever the hell they're using. But they needed to get a hold of the slaves' minds. And so they needed to get rid of the ancestral religions that the slaves brought with them because they were tying them to a different life that they wanted them to forget about. So and the other thing is that a lot of, nobody could read. So the worship, the recitation of the Bible, it became almost an oral tradition. And even coming down into present day, they did a survey. They went to black churches and they said, what is more important to you, the blood of Jesus Christ or the blood of your ancestors? And 90% of black people said the blood of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
So it was a really insidious.
They drink it every fourth Sunday.
Well, that's right.
Right.
And so it's a really insidious way of getting people to remove their loyalty from their tribe, basically, and pledge their loyalty to the white Jesus, which is so it's very, very much tied in with the whole history of colonialism and slavery and everything else.
Yeah. Oh, Drey, in your experience, I don't have background in black church, in a black church or black, Protestant denominations at all. So, although on my mom's side, that's really not true. Like if you go above my maternal grandmother, then everything gets very Protestant, very religious, very, very fast. And so that sort of culture was part of that generation. But my mom really rejected that. So I didn't get any of that. But I wonder, you said black Jesus or white Jesus. Is that a real thing? Is that something like in the church, like in your experience, was the Jesus white?
Yes.
That's remarkable. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think the image of black Jesus was just something I saw on television, or just hearing other militant black people talk about that. And specifically, we were also told to ignore that talk.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah. We were taught to ignore that. Jesus was white. And we have no problem with that. Right. Like, hey, Santa Claus is white. We have no problem with that.
Right. Santa Claus is white. Right.
Yeah, we have no problem with that. Jesus was always white growing up.
Wow, that's fascinating. I mean, it just seems like there's so much internalized. You guys have heard that there's a study, and I'm sure I've said this before on the show, but there's a study that even if you with a black little girl and you give her two dolls, right, and one is black and one is white, and you ask her which one, it point to the one that is bad, right, and she points to the black doll, right, and so it's sort of this internalized racism, right, where it's like, right, we grew up in the same environment that is so racist that we don't even see the racism, right, like it's the system. It's the system, and we're black people, and we still can sometimes not see it, let alone a white person who is really doesn't want to look at their privilege, doesn't want to look at these issues seriously. You can start to see how the denial can be so thick, just like the self-denial,
Yeah.
Wild.
I mean, I wonder when Sean was, talking about the documentary, and I wonder, or maybe maybe the documentary touched on this, but I wonder if slaves back then, they accepted Christianity easier because they thought it would make the white man accept them faster.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of that. I mean, if you have no power, you want to do whatever you can to conform, just to survive. I think that there was a lot of that going on, and I think it was also probably forced.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And like, and there's just like what you said, I think is super important, Sean, and that is this a colonization of the mind, right? And Christianity, religion in general, but Christianity, especially American style, Protestant Christianity, really has been a tool of, I mean, just such an explicit tool of oppression. It like in United American history, from the Native Americans to enslaved Africans to on and on and on. And by the way, also in India, in the African colonies from the European colonialism. The Christianity and the hierarchy that it creates with white Jesus at the top of it, importantly, ends up being a real sort of internalized colonialism that ends up happening. It's remarkable, and this is why when people say like it's just easy to understand from that perspective why people will just shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, I'm okay with white Jesus. I'm okay with this sort of these structures, and I'm going to turn or point to the black doll as and it's easy to understand that when you look at it from that perspective. It's awful. It's awful, but
right, yeah, but it's easy to understand.
But it's easy to understand, So here's a question I want to ask you guys. So we're secularists, right? So should we be upset that 44% of Black churchgoers hear message about social issues in Sunday sermons? Like, I mean, so we talk about the church staying out of politics, right? I mean, now that's a really complicated question, right? Because should we be worried about that?
So, I'm sorry, Sean. Go.
Okay. So I think that, well, first of all, we want to separate church and state, religion and politics. But if you're going to have politics within sermons, it would be much better to have social justice politics than right-wing politics.
Right.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. It depends on what politics you're preaching.
Right. Are you preaching theocracy and fascism, or are you preaching voting rights? Because those are two very, very different conversations, right? Those are two very different conversations.
So here's something that where the church could do, because in my opinion, one of the reasons the Black community isn't thriving is because of the church. I absolutely believe that wholeheartedly.
That's interesting.
The church takes a lot of money out of poor families, a lot. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, a lot. If you would think about the money, my grandmother died a year ago, and she paid her tithes every single month. As long as I've been living, and I'm 47 years old. Right. She paid her tithes every single month. Mm-hmm. Imagine the money she would have if she hadn't have done that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The lifetime savings would have been amazing.
Right. So my mother and her sisters, my grandmother's house wasn't even paid off. It's still something like $30,000 left on it. Mm-hmm. And I'm very sure that she gave the church way more than $30,000 over the last 40 years.
Sure.
Right. So her house isn't paid off, and that debt, that burden has been passed to family members. And the churches, I bet you they don't have the debt.
No. Right.
Right. Yeah. So
they don't even pay taxes.
Oh my God, they don't even pay taxes. That's $1 billion. That's $1 billion right there. Yep. That could be pumped back into the Black community.
Absolutely.
Back into schools, back into programs. Mm-hmm. We talk about reparations. There it is right there. Mm-hmm. If you want reparations, tax the church and funnel that money into impoverished Black communities. I mean, in fact, across the board, pump it into impoverished communities everywhere. Whether you're Black, whether it's a Black neighborhood, whether it's a Spanish neighborhood, doesn't matter. But take that money from the church and do something good with it. Because right now it's not really, nothing good is coming from it.
That was a major point in the movie Contradiction. He spent a lot of time actually kind of driving around these really depressed neighborhoods and just showing how many churches there were and how many people were giving their money to those churches rather than putting it into their communities. And a lot of times the people who run the churches are just taking that money out of the community. They're not even putting it into the church building.
They don't live in the community. The pastors don't live where their church are. I mean, where their church is. Pastors live, especially if you're, if you have a pretty decent sized church and you're a pastor that's taking a salary, you live in the suburbs. So you're not shopping at that corner store across the street from the church. You're not shopping at the grocery store. If there's a grocery store in that community, you're not shopping there. You're shopping out at Kohl's. And, so yeah, you're right. That money isn't even being pumped back into the Black community.
That's right.
Yeah, it's awful. So yeah, in my opinion, you want to start building up the Black community, start reforming the financial structure of the church.
Absolutely.
Stop taking money out of the community. Because you guys say you guys never so you've never been to a Black church?
I've never been to a Black. Well, that's not really true. I've been to church, but I didn't grow up in it. But I've been to Black churches.
Oh man, you've missed a lot of fun.
I'll bet.
Man, you missed revivals Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and then back to church on Sunday morning. You've missed pastors' appreciations. That's like another whole week. You've missed the usher board appreciation when you literally go to church like another week just to honor the ushers.
Wow.
You've missed a lot of fun.
There's a lot to it. And so let's talk. We've talked a lot about the significance of the Black church in the Black community, but I want to sort of go back to sort of the historic role that the Black church has played. And let me just read a Time magazine report here. Black churches were the first institutions built by Black people and run independent of white society in the United States. For a people systematically brutalized and debased by the inhuman system of slavery, followed by a century of Jim Crow racism, the church provided a refuge. No pillar of the African American community has been more central to its history, identity, and social justice vision than the Black church. To be sure, there is no single Black church, just as there is no single Black religion, but the traditions and faiths that fall under the umbrella of African American religion, particularly Christianity, constitute two stories. One of a people defining themselves in the presence of a higher power, and the other of their journey for freedom and equality in a land where where power itself and even humanity for so long was and still is denied them. Collectively, these churches make up the oldest institution created and controlled by African Americans, and they are more than simply places of worship. In the centuries since its birth, in the time of slavery, the Black church has stood as the foundation of Black religious, political, economic, and social life. So, guys, the institution of, and by the way, we can talk about the fact that the Black church often, it sort of created a reprieve from the racist world, a place where African Americans could come together in community to advance their aspirations. It fueled slave rebellions, nurtured and sustained the Underground Railroad, the training ground for orators of the abolition movement. It powered anti-lynching campaigns and economic boycotts. It formed the backbone of and meeting place for the civil rights movement. Right?
Yeah, it did some great things.
It did some great things.
Yeah.
So obviously, so
did the Boy Scouts, though.
So you're saying, it sounds like you're saying we shouldn't just let well enough alone, right? We shouldn't just say like, well, the church did a lot of good things, so we should just shrug our shoulders and say, yeah, so here we are.
Right, because I think we all just agreed that the church also takes a lot of money out of the community.
That's right.
Which is why Black people cannot rise above. Which is the reason Black people can't build wealth.
Right. Yep.
The church is at the heart of that. If I do think that if the church, especially in Black communities, was not there, you would have more Black people owning land, owning houses, starting businesses. And you wouldn't have a police presence. I know I'm getting into the weeds here though, but you wouldn't have had a police presence in these areas for a George Floyd to be killed in that manner, because it would be a nice, upstanding neighborhood.
Yeah. In my mind, and again, I'm looking at this from, I'm obviously a Black person, but from, but an outsider to that culture in a lot of ways, to the Black church culture anyway. But it's very clear to me, right? I mean, there's millions of memes, right? The old Black ladies in the big hats, and your Sunday shoes and your Sunday clothes, right? I mean,
that's the fun part.
That's the fun part, right?
That's the fun part.
So much culture is woven into is there a way to reform this institution so that it is essentially secular? I mean, because the infrastructure of the institution is good, right? It does good things. The community is important, but it comes with this batshit also, though, right? Speaking in tongues and false hope, right? False hope, right? Instead of putting that $30,000 into something useful, you end up just giving it to a pastor, right? And so this is and for a group of people who have been so abused and church
misguided.
Religion gives them hope, gives people hope, right? It gives people hope. And this is a question that probably doesn't have an easy answer, and I don't expect you guys to have one, but how do you even begin to replace that pillar of an entire culture? Maybe hear me out. Maybe if Black people feel more a part of mainstream culture, then it becomes less necessary to have an entirely separate parallel culture going on. I don't know. How do you guys
I don't know. I mean, Black people love their Jesus. I don't know, Sean, you can take that one.
Well, I want to say as a white person and as somebody who's really not familiar with the Black church, other than watching a documentary, I'm probably not that qualified to comment. However, I will say that in the latter half of that documentary, he goes through the 7 steps that these preachers use to basically bamboozle the Black community into living in fear, giving them money and all of these things. And there's also a lot of victim blaming that goes on. Like if if you're not successful, it's your fault. You didn't give Jesus enough money or whatever. It's just there's a whole trap. So I don't have an answer for that. And I think that's a problem for atheism generally, because religion has this built-in organizing power.
Yes.
Right? And there's so much disagreement in the secular community about ethics and about, and the other thing I want to say is that the church in general, Black and white, has this built-in conservatism with homophobia, transphobia, male dominance, and all these things that
is strong in the Black community too.
Big.
Yeah. Bigly.
So how do you, because it really seems that Black people understand for the most part that the Democratic Party better represents them because it stands against the wealthy and powerful. On the other hand, there's a lot of things that Black people believe that agree with Republicans in the sense of social issues. And so it's a weird mix to me. And I'm not sure that I totally understand it.
I think, Sean, I think that's why
abortion too, by the way. That's
right.
That's another big one.
Everything Sean just said is absolutely right. On one end, I think that's why Black people kind of stay out of politics. Or more Black people stay out of politics than white, is because I think they are kind of somewhat confused, even if they don't know it. Because you're right, when it comes to their morality, they are lockstep. They align more with the Republicans than they do Democrats, right? The Republicans are the party of Jesus. They're the religious party. They're the party. They're anti-gay. They're pro-family. Everything that the Democrats are supposed to not be, right? I mean, we know that's all bullshit, but as if like Democrats aren't pro-family.
Yeah,
but you know, but you're right. Black people, you know, black people are really homophobic, like really, really homophobic.
Right.
Yeah,
transphobic.
They're phobic everything.
Yeah.
You can just take a word and throw it in front of phobia, and that will describe you know the average Black person in America. So yeah, you're right. I think that's probably part of the reason Trump's Black vote count went up this last election, right? Because because the you know what, Republicans are really good at branding.
Oh my God, yes.
They are, you can tell they're a party of business because they know slogans and branding, and Black people know, we are very susceptible to branding and slogans. So yeah, just to piggyback on what Sean said. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And like you say, Drey, contradictory, like internally contradictory, right? It's like on one hand being like, right, I hate, I'm part of being a Black person, and being part of the Black church in many cases is one of civil rights and blah, 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 but not for gay people. Right? Not for trans, not for, it's like, how, that's so internally inconsistent. Like, how do you even, I mean, I had this conversation with my dad before. My dad's very conservative, very religious, all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, how do you, on one hand, talk about, civil rights, and on the other hand,
how do you reconcile that?
How do you reconcile? I literally asked him that, how do you reconcile that in your head? You can almost see the cognitive dissonance, like as he's trying to respond, like, because there's two ideas, and then what you do instead is just, like you said, just check out, right?
Right.
Just check out, blinders on, I'm going to church, praise Jesus. That's it, right?
The other thing that's in the Black community, mental illness. That's something else we don't deal with.
Right. That's absolutely right. And and doctors in general, right? And the mistrust of the medical community.
Yes.
So let's talk about, speaking of which, let's talk about speaking of Black religion and Black atheism, let's talk about atheism in the Black community. So in 2019,
I think it's just me and you.
I really do think it might just be the two of us and like 15 other people on the entire planet. A 2019 study from Pew Research found that among Americans who identify as atheists, 81% are white and only 3% are Black. Black atheists sometimes refer to themselves as a minority within a minority. Much of what the three of us have discussed so far seems to reinforce that. So let's talk about that tiny minority of Black people who are atheists. I first want to talk about the experience of Black folks who leave the church, and perhaps compare and contrast that with the experience of leaving other religious institutions. We talked a little bit about this before. So as Brandon Withrow writes in the Daily Beast, belief is often inextricably tied to race in the Black community. Although I disagree with the message, for many, it's a source of hope, connection, history, and sometimes empowerment. Distancing oneself from that means losing resources, thereby adding burdens, which often curtail decisions to leave the church. Someone called, this is a really tough name to say, but I'll say it, Sikivu Hutchinson, very intense name. She's an atheist, activist, and author who founded Black Skeptics Los Angeles, expresses a similar sentiment. In an Associated Press article, she says, quote, "Most folks are coming from a religious family upbringing. There's a lot of trauma with rejecting organized religions, those networks, and the dogma and ideology associated with them." So it seems to me that leaving the Black church is a lot like leaving disassociating oneself with any insular group. But do you think, Drey, that there are any special challenges that Black people face in leaving the church? That is because I tend to think that there is, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, we kind of touched on that earlier. It's the fear of being shunned by your family, disowned by your family,
right? Right.
You know, pretty much exiled from the community. And that's it. You know, and again, that's if you're an atheist. I'm gonna tell you, I've yet to meet another Black atheist face to face.
Really?
Never.
That's amazing.
That is remarkable.
Yeah, every Black atheist I know is through this screen.
Right.
It's like this. It's on Facebook, on Twitter. I know they're out there because I interact with them online, but I've yet to meet, because I might meet a Black guy or girl, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't believe in God," but they still believe in something. Like, they believe in a higher power. They just don't believe in God. I'm like, well, it's the same thing.
It's the same fucking thing. Yeah.
It's the same thing. Or, you don't believe in God, but you still believe somehow the planets, dictate what you're going to do tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah. So to me, same thing. You're still superstitious. So I don't know. I don't run into a lot of atheists. I know they're out there, Black atheists. I know they're out there, but I don't get a chance to talk to them one-on-one. I would love to have them up for dinner.
Same thing with me. I mean, Black people are just so severely sort of underrepresented in the atheist community. And I think a lot of that is, like you say, Black folks that are like your experience, right? The experience you talked about before. It's hard to leave.
It's really hard.
The community. You are basically, Sean and I have a similar experience in sort of a different way. And that is like the challenge of leaving a small, tight-knit community, right? Is really hard. And by the way, I have even a sub experience with that, because I spent years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Right. And I'm not anymore. I haven't been in probably 10 years, but I was for a while. And it is hard. I had never felt more personal anxiety and fear than I did when I said, you know what, AA is not for me. You guys are, this is a religion, basically. And so it operates almost exactly the same way. And I don't want to do this. This is not right for me. But I had this crippling anxiety for a long time. And again, it's like you say, it's losing the social networks that ends up being a trap for people. Right. Because even if you don't believe the doctrine, your entire family is a part of this. Everyone is part of this. How are you going to leave? And by the way, if you're in the Black community, you tend to hang out with all Black people, and Black people tend to be religious.
They're gonna love Jesus.
They're gonna. I think we might have to change the name of the show to "Black People Love Jesus."
Right. Tyler Perry's "Black People Love Jesus."
Tyler Perry, yes, totally. Tyler Perry.
The first guy to do my podcast, my very first podcast, he was an atheist, and then he wasn't anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's rare.
That is rare to go back.
Right.
Once you're out.
Right. But it's really funny because when I start doing my podcast again, I actually want to revisit that, because during our conversation, there were some things I was picking up on that made me think, you're not all the way out yet. Right. Yeah. You're still, you're going to dip back and forth. Like, this is, maybe it's a process. For me, I was lucky enough to be overseas for a long time. So I didn't have, religion. No one was trying to pressure me to go to church.
That's interesting.
Right. Yeah. One, I was just getting in from the club, probably when church was starting. So So nobody was pressuring me to go to church. So it was a little bit easier for me, because I didn't have to have 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Right.
But I got the feeling that my first guest, he was like that. And it was maybe a year later, I started seeing religious posts on his Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've talked to a cousin before. I'm not going to out him. I talked to a cousin before, and he expressed to me that he was pretty much, at least agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then he got married, and all of a sudden he was back to loving Jesus.
Yeah.
That's
Also,
my.
Yeah. Well, black women are the most religious group, right? That is I mean, so if you're a lot of times if you marry a black woman, all of a sudden, right? If you want to have this relationship work,
right? If you want some nasty, you're gonna love Jesus.
You better start loving Jesus quick.
What I found interesting about all of this is it's very similar to just atheism generally, that there's a perception among a lot of people that just expressing atheism is hostile because you're challenging them. You're immediately putting them on the spot. And I was saying to Jillian this morning that I think that the idea of God is almost just a part of the social contract. It's sort of almost assumed that you will respect God, that you believe that God is the source of morality, of creation, of all of those things. And even just as a figure of speech, when you say, "Oh my God," or "God help us," or all these things that are just
God bless you,
baked in. Yeah, God bless you. And I've had to in my life sort of get over getting upset when I sneeze and somebody says "God bless you," because they don't really mean that. They don't really mean to insult me as an atheist, right? But this is just something, and I experienced this the other day when somebody was talking about, well, I don't care what you believe, I just don't want you to be hostile about it. And there's so many hostile atheists, and I was going, what do you mean? We're just talking about what's true and what can be proven. Why is that hostile? Oh, well, you don't have to, and they really were essentially saying that for an atheist to talk about atheism was a no-no.
Yeah.
Right. Because they believe that, Sean. They really do. Right. Mm-hmm. I've had family members say that, hey, it's okay if you believe that, but why are you trying to convert everybody else? I'm like, You mean what you guys do?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, what? That is the audacity of saying that. Are you kidding me?
I remember knocking on doors like a damn Jehovah's Witnesses. We called it witnessing. We brought people to the church. And atheists, we're not trying to convert anyone. We're just trying to make you think.
Just having a conversation, even.
That's it. It's hostile. Just a conversation.
I've never knocked on anybody's door. I've never gone up to anybody in public and say, "Hey, have you heard the word of atheism?"
Yeah, right. Have you heard the good word? Yeah.
Right. And it's crazy, Sean, because when you said that, I've never thought about it in that way, that God is part of the social contract, right? I've always said, if I'm walking through Walmart, everybody in Walmart assumes that I'm a Christian or assume that I believe in something, right? And the reason I know that, because if I just got into a conversation with someone and I say, "Oh man, I had a flat tire, but luckily I had a spare," they will say something like, "Well, ain't God good? Won't God do it?" Right? Right? They're so comfortable with expressing their own religious ideology, right? Yeah. That they never
all the
stop
time.
To think. All the time. They don't stop to
all
think.
The time.
Hey, you might not be a Christian.
And I've never seen anybody sit there and pray by their tire, right? I mean, it's not going to change on its own.
Nothing is going to change. But well, I think Jesus did get my sister a Jeep, not a new Jeep. And it's probably not at a good interest rate, but she really did pray for this Jeep for years, and she got it.
Good interest rate. Oh, that's really great. That's really funny. Well, look, I mean, we're getting toward the end, but I want to talk to you guys about sort of racism in the atheist community.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is, I think, a pretty serious problem. We discussed some of the ways in which the atheist movement might sort of, well, we should talk about how the atheist movement might transfer itself into sort of like an anti-racist movement, but it's not that right now. And I'm going to read some excerpts from a guy named Martin Hughes over at Patheos. And back in 2016, Hughes addresses the openly racist rantings of a very popular white male atheist YouTuber. And quote, recently, the amazing atheist, the popular YouTuber known as TJ Kirk, answered 20 questions Black people asked in a video. His answers were proudly and ignorantly racist. I'm sick and tired of people wondering where the heck Black atheists are when nonsense like this gets so much popularity. It's because a significant and growing portion of atheists are proud, outright racists that would make the Ku Klux Klan blush. It's almost as if now that Black people have gotten a prominent place in Protestant Christianity, protesting white people are leaving so they can claim the atheist circuit as the safe space for the racism and drastic misinterpretations of Black culture. Black culture. Ugh, that's a whole thing. I almost didn't want to write this blog post because it's so tedious, but as of now, the amazing atheist video, which came out about 6 days ago, has over 47,000 views and about 90% like rate. People love it. It makes me feel out of place as a Black man among atheists. It makes me disconcertingly ill at the prospect of a bunch of cheering KKK racists running around proud of their ignorance, retrograde revolutionaries trapped in a pre-Civil War mindset who think it's cutting edge to be racist, like it's the next big thing, end quote. Drey, is the problem of white racism in the atheist community overstated or understated? Is it a real problem?
I cannot speak to that at all. I know the video you're talking about. Is that the videos back a couple of years ago?
Yeah. It's old.
Yeah, I know what video you're talking about. TK Kirk, right? I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Because I think about that video, and it does elicit a response, a sort of one embarrassment for him, and then anger for me. Here's the issue with racism. Like I said, I don't know. You guys might be able to talk much more about racism in the atheist community, because again, I only know atheists online. And yes, I've run into some atheists that, had some unfair and unhealthy perceptions of me as a Black man. I've run into, some interactions with other atheists online that, just like TK Kirk, that's his name, right?
Yeah.
They don't understand my plight and my struggle as a Black man and how I relate to America, or even more important, how America relates to me. I think in that video, I remember him saying, he pretty much said there was no such thing as systematic racism.
That's right.
Right. I thought, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
I wish I would have watched it before now.
Pretty much every trope that you can think of about
he hit it.
Every single
he
one.
hit it, yeah. But the problem with that is I don't think he knows Black people. Right. And if you don't know Black people, then you're pretty much making up what you think about me, you're pretty much making it up. And you're not understanding, why this Black person is a certain way, or this community, this neighborhood. You can look to the neighborhood and say, hey, there's a hell of a lot of crime happening there. Well, yeah, but there's also a hell of a lot of crime happening in the Native American community. Right? Why? because there's not a lot of resources. Anytime there's not any resources, anytime there isn't a lot of money, flowing around the community, you're gonna fucking fight for it.
That's what's gonna happen.
The same thing, right? It's gonna happen. I know some trailer parks in Michigan that has very high crime rates, and it's all white people.
Exactly. Where there's poverty, there's crime. I mean,
there's crime.
That's just, they go hand in hand.
Right.
And
I'm fortunate enough to live in a suburb.
Mm-hmm.
The reason my neighbor isn't going to break into my house because my neighbor has everything I have.
Right. Exactly right.
What are you going to steal?
Right.
Right. But that's not the case, in desperate communities. Yeah. But I don't know. Let me ask you guys, is there a problem with racism in the atheist community?
I think the person who could speak to this the best is Sean, because white people aren't racist around black people usually. They're usually racist around other white people.
That is true.
So I think, Drey, you probably remember that the whole sort of split that happened in the atheist movement around 2010, 2011 after Elevator Gate and all of that stuff. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay. Well, this had more to do with sexism than racism, and it was involving a conference, and there was a woman in an elevator, and
yes, you told. I remember this.
Yeah. So anyway, my point is that prior to that moment, there was a lack of awareness in the atheist community of social justice, of sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, all that stuff was just not really getting play because it was all about just not believing in God. And what has happened since then is there has really been a sort of bifurcation in the movement. And at one point there was Atheism Plus, which was people kind of trying to forge a movement that was atheism plus social justice. And we sort of see ourselves in that role at this point. Mm-hmm. And it's why I kind of disassociated from most of the atheist movement, because there was a big backlash against that. And there's a number of people who we otherwise would really respect in the atheist community, like Sam Harris and Steven Pinker and Michael Shermer. And, they've gotten together with some other academics, like, for example, John McWhorter, who is very sort of, he's anti-racism, which I think makes him a racist. But, right. it's like one of the things he was doing is going after people like Ta-Nehisi Coates and other social justice writers by saying, that they had made, that they were the ones who were causing the problem as opposed to trying to solve the problem. One of the large atheist organizations had a booth at CPAC. And the first year that the atheist organization tried to get a booth at CPAC, they were turned down. And then they let them in the next year because they're like, well, hey, we don't care. We just want Republican votes, right? And so you have actually a certain number of people in the atheist movement who do support Donald Trump, who do support conservative ideas. And a lot of, as far as we're concerned, most of the time, there's no separating economic conservatism from racism.
Mm-mm.
Right.
Agreed. And by the way, there's also, there's what I am finding in my experience, and this is just, online or whatever, is that the libertarians, you have a lot of libertarians who are atheists, right? Or atheists that are libertarians. So they perhaps, and you know how libertarians are like, oh, I'm not really Republican because I don't believe in X, Y, and Z, and they're religious and stuff like that. But like I still believe in all the same things, but I just call myself a libertarian, and I'm
right, like the new independent.
Exactly. Yeah, the new independent. Exactly. Or I like to smoke weed, so therefore I'm not going to be a Republican and whatever. But so that's what I'm seeing a lot, and I think this guy, TJT Kirk or whatever, he identified himself as a libertarian for a long time, and now he doesn't anymore, but he is a progressive. He calls himself a progressive, which is like, what? Progressivism and racism don't go together.
And I've seen, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go for it.
I've seen, I don't follow him on any social media platform, but I've seen posts, from him over the last couple of years. And never one that I was like, oh, right on, guy.
Yeah, right.
Never. It's never that. But again, like, as I was just saying earlier, Sam Harris is one of them. I like Sam Harris, not necessarily for his views or half of his views, but when it comes to social issues, right, he misses the mark.
Oh my God.
Fucking time.
Every time.
If I can ever sit down with him, and I don't know, maybe I'm being naive in thinking this, but I want to think it's because Sam Harris and the TJ Kirks and people like them, they just don't know us as Black men, right? Right. They need to sit down with a Black person and have a dialogue and let the Black person, and it has to be one-sided. They have to listen. Right. They have to listen. And you have to allow me to explain to you, because I'm going to concede to whatever gripes you have about the Black community. I'm going to concede to them, because what you hate about us, I hate about us too.
Right. They're valid criticisms, right? They're valid. There are some valid criticisms.
There's valid, but there's also a reason it's like that, and that's more important. So yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, and I think that's the part that, the Sam Harris's, the Christopher Hitchens, right? I got his book back here, but still,
right? Steven Pinker,
right? Yeah, they missed the mark, because I don't think they've never had a Black guy over for dinner.
Yeah. And also, they're also white men. That's the thing.
Right.
We're overlooking the fact that the atheist community is 81% white men. White men are comically and hilariously, typically speaking, unaware of the experience of not being a white man.
Because what was it, Louis C.K. that said in one of his stand-ups, anywhere you go, he can get on a time machine, and anywhere he goes in history, he's going to step out and he's going to be good. Yeah. Right.
No, but on top, like not even just okay, not even just okay, like running the world, world.
Right. Yeah. And look, I have no idea what that feels like.
Me neither.
Yeah. I don't know what that feels like. And it's okay. I don't need to know how it feels like if you didn't constantly remind me that I'll never know what that feels like.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the important thing is, like, this is a thing that gets thrown around all the time with, be happy that Black people don't want revenge, just equality, right? Like, I don't need to be the most powerful group, right? We don't need to make you pay, because that's a paranoid thing that on the right, this idea that Black people want to dominate white people, which is just not fucking true. Yeah. Of course, there's some people, there's always the militant people, but that's not most people.
They ain't gonna do shit either, though.
They're not. No one's gonna do shit. Everyone just wants a seat at the table. That's all. Yeah, that's all.
Well, the funniest thing about it is I think a lot of that white fear comes from they know exactly how they've acted with and what they've done with their power.
Right. That's right.
Sean, I think you're right about that. It's they know that they are vindictive, so they expect the same from us. They know, right? They know what this is, like Republicans.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to say next. That's exactly what I was going to say next. It's so funny you brought it.
It's your show. I'm going to let you say it.
Because McConnell gets up there and says, "Look, this is a power grab. This is a Democratic power grab with this like waddling." But like he says that because that's what he would do, right? Mm-hmm. So he thinks that Democrats are doing this. Like, no, actually, we really do care about social justice. We really do care about voting. We're not just doing this because we want to be in power. Yes, everybody wants to be in power to some extent, of course, but. No, we are like, that's how you think. And so you're projecting that on us. It's so funny that you brought that up. That's the next thing that was coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Well, look, Drey, it's been a lot of fun having you here with us.
Oh my God, is it over?
Well, yeah, I know.
Didn't we just start?
I know. It feels like we just started. We'll have to have you back. Do you have anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say? Any final thoughts?
No, I have nothing to plug. No, man, look, especially off this last story, man, we just got to start listening to each other, right? As a not just atheism, but as a society, we really got to start listening to each other. We got to start caring about each other's well-being. Just take that and pay it forward. That's it.
Absolutely.
Right on.
Right on, man. Right on. And just a little bit of empathy, right?
Right.
That
all
goes
of
that goes a long fucking way. Well, again, thanks so much, Drey. And we will have you back because this was a lot of fun. A great conversation,
Thank you.
And,
can't wait for your podcast.
I can't either.
We will. You'll have to have us on.
You know what? It was actually while you guys were talking, I was thinking to myself, man, I actually already got an idea for having you guys on.
Yeah.
Now, if you know Drey, it'll be 8 years from now before you get the call.
We'll still be here.
We'll still be here doing this on Saturday.
I always got a plan.
Awesome.
Always.
Well,
always got a plan.
Awesome, man. Thanks. Well, thanks so much, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I had a lot of fun talking to Drey. Sean, what sticks out for you? Anything in particular?
Well, I just found it really interesting, once again, to sort of confront the stereotypes, right? Because we asked Drey, about Black atheism, and he's like, I don't know. He's like, he doesn't have an explanation for it. And just one more time, we can't stereotype people. We can't think that all Black people understand of all other Black people any more than white people understand all other white people. And I think that's just really important to keep in mind. There's the diversity of the Black experience as well.
That's a great point. Both of those points, I think, first of all, the diversity of the Black experience is important, right? So my experience is so different than Drey's in a lot of ways, right? I mean, we're in similar places in our lives now. We've got two Black guys who live in the suburbs and, have decent lives and whatever, but but I didn't grow up in the Black church, quote unquote, in Black culture, quote unquote, right? I mean, I grew up all around white people, and so his experience and my experience is radically different. I think it's fascinating, and I think it's sort of ironic too that he's the guy who grew up in the Black church, but also became, was thinking like an atheist as a teenager. Meanwhile, I'm, it takes me as a person who grew up around all white people and not particularly religious white people at that. And it takes me until I'm in my early 30s to really be thinking seriously about atheism and have that those kind of like serious thoughts. So it was really, he mentioned that he had never really met a Black atheist before. And I was like, neither have I really. And so Drey, if you're out there and you're listening and you're watching, it's really, really, really good to know you, man. And it was a lot of fun talking to you. So look, if you like our show, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, check out theradicalsecular.com and tell your friends to listen. New episodes post Mondays at noon Eastern on YouTube and all the major podcast channels. And if you're into reading, check out the blog at theradicalsecular.com. I'm Christophe Defoe. Thank you for being here. And remember, wherever you are, you can be radically secular.